Yeah. Well, do we close right at 6?
I thought we closed at 7.
You just check.
Check, check, check. Hey everybody, welcome back. We are here to do another Wednesday night beer tasting, our 5th so far. And for tonight, we are not going to do what we did the first week, just a random assemblage of beers that I happen to think were awesome. We're not going to do a brewery profile tasting because, well, there flatly wasn't enough SYC for me to be able to do that. So we're going to talk about a city this time. We're going to talk about the city of Edmonton. And the city of Edmonton, really, in terms of modern brewing, gets started with Alley Cat back in 1995. And I absolutely love Alley Cat. They don't do tall cans, so we don't have one of those up here yet. But for a very long time, I maintained that that Old Deuteronomy barley wine of theirs was the best beer brewed in Alberta. And I think it was that for a very, very, very long time. And I love a big barley wine. I think Nigel still has a few bottles, or maybe more than a few bottles, of some very old Deuteronomy bottles in his own cellar. It's just one of those beers that ages forever. But in terms of kind of the modern craft beer explosion in Alberta that kind of happened from 2014 onwards, Edmonton's been pretty silent. I mean, Medicine Hat's been having it rocking with Hell's Basement and MH Brew Co. Lacombe, of course, has had Blind Man. Calgary's had so many different cool breweries, not just the 3 or 4 that we focused on lately. We had Snake Lake happening. We've just had so much crazy stuff, but our provincial capital stayed so oddly quiet all this time. Well, it turns out that a lot of that was happening a little bit behind the scenes. Situation opened in 2016, but Situation isn't really a brewery so much as they're a brew pub. They do sell to the public, and they sell down here. We don't carry lots of their beers because all of their cans have the exact same barcode, which is great. So we only carry one at a time. But most of their stuff is served on premises. And that's kind of their whole business model. So Situation has been, unless you went to Edmonton, very hard to find. Fast forward a little bit to 2018, and we got Sea Change, which was one of the breweries that I really wanted to feature on here after we found out we couldn't get quite enough SYC to do a profile. And then finally SYC opened in 2019, and they were really the brewery that, after kind of 88 cabin establishment, Blind Man, we wanted something else, just keep this amazing beer train rolling. And we got a recommendation, I think Nigel got the recommendation about SYC and how cool their stuff was. It was just showing up in Connect, and we grabbed it and we haven't looked back since. I really wanted to do the Pineapple Fomo Sour because I absolutely love that beer, but once again, there's no stock. So let's stop talking about what we didn't get, and let's talk about what we did. We have a Kveik wheat dry hop with Sabro hops. This is called Salud, so let's dig into this. I will not forget Travois and Medicine Hat. Thank you, Chad. Honestly, it's so amazing right now that I probably left off the list like 5 breweries that I absolutely insanely respect. Not because, you know, they're not talking about, like, I didn't mention Annex, who is awesome. Yeah, there's so many that I can't get them all, and isn't that amazing? So let's talk a little bit about what this is. So this is a wheat ale, which of course is our topic for next week, but it's a little bit different. For those of you who are stuck around for the 88 tasting with me and Jesse, we talked about Kveik a little bit. So Kveik is a Norwegian farmhouse yeast, and it ferments very fast and it ferments very, very hot. And what it does is it gives you a really nice dry finish on a beer because it's really efficient and it sucks up a lot of sugar to turn into alcohol. So those big, sticky, sweet IPAs, like, and this is going to date me a little bit, Tree Hophead, they're not really, you can't make those with a Kveik yeast. They also just give you tons and tons and tons of really pretty tropical fruit. And that's not what I would normally think of when I think Norway, but this is one of those beers fermented with this Kveik yeast, as is their Fjord New England Pale. Other than that, it's a wheat beer, so it's got that nice kind of summery tartness we always associate with wheat. And then it is dry hopped with Sabro hops, which is one of the new hop varieties that is just hitting the market. You get that really pretty tropical fruit just right off the hop, and you immediately then get that nice kind of tart, sweet lemon character I always get from wheat ales. Oh, that's just summer in a glass to me. I really like that. For a very long time, I think that wheat ales got a bit of a bad rap for being very much the same. You either got a Hefeweizen, or you got a wit, or maybe you got an American wheat, and they all kind of tasted the same. They're cloudy wheat beers with, you know, kind of a nice lemony tartness. They had a really, really long finish. And that was really all they needed to be. You know, the ones from Germany would be kind of clovey and banana-y from the Hefeweizen yeast, and the ones from Belgium would be kind of coriander-y and spicy. there wasn't a lot of variation, but just like anything else, I mean, wheat can be used in almost any application. And we're going to talk a little bit about that next week. But with this isn't like I really struggle to pigeonhole this as any one style. I mean, it's not a Hefeweizen, but there's notes here I could say are a little bit Belgian-y in the sense that it's very yeasty. And I also really get a really nice, pretty American wheat character with the hops. This kind of ticks a lot of boxes for me. It's a really good lawnmower beer to me, just something to be out in the backyard with, and you know, it's not that strong, so if you want a second one, you know, hair on you. Alcohol at 4.3. And I really like the can too. It's got a really cool like Day of the Dead theme going on, which I'm very fond of. Nice shirt. Yes, I was told that the fancy button-down shirts were a little too formal for the beer tasting by Aaron. So this is a Toronado beer shirt from San Francisco. If you've ever been to San Francisco and you wanted to go to a cool beer bar, Toronado's basically the original like craft beer bar on planet Earth. They've been around since kind of the early 1980s, and they started out serving the little tiny bit of craft beer that existed back then, which would have been like New Albion and Anchor, and then they were bringing in all of the really, really crazy Belgian and German stuff that nobody else would touch. Toronado is, I'm not even going to put this politely, it's a skeezy looking dive bar, but they always have super crazy rare beer. Their pints of Russian River Blind Pig and Russian River Pliny the Elder are the cheapest anywhere. They're cheaper than actually getting them at Russian River. It's one of those institutions, you know, you got to go there, sit at the bar, and have the bartender be mean to you, because that's just the experience of going to Toronado. So one of my favorite places to go. I've been to Toronado, I don't know, half a dozen times, and if I'm in San Francisco, I absolutely have to go. So we're going to touch on a few different styles here. We're not going to, I want to talk a bit about some of the beers that we didn't get a chance to try, specifically from SYC, because there just isn't enough of them. They're also doing a Saison. We're going to touch on the Saison with this situation here. But they do a Nuage Table Saison, which is a Saison that's done at a fairly low alcohol, so it's a Belgian ale with a very, very easy to drink sessionable style. They of course have the pineapple FOMO sour, which is their dry hopped sour. Like Ariel points out, it is quite similar to the Duotang from '88 in style. It's just bright and fresh and cheerful and a sour, and I really quite like it. And then finally we have the Curiosity Killed the Cat and First Timer IPAs, Curiosity being a double IPA. And those are really classic, like right down the middle, super pretty, hop forward, nice aggressive IPAs that I find very, very refreshing. Now, without a special guest tonight, I'm going to be struggling a little bit to fill air, so if you've got questions, go ahead and hit me up with them. Unfortunately, I have not yet been to any of these breweries. I have not been to Edmonton in almost 6 years now, so. Right, we'll move right on, and we'll get into the Situation Brewing Afternooner Tea Saison. Now, last year was the summer of the New England Pale. Everyone had a New England Pale, and then everyone else had a sour, and it was all we sold was New England Pales and sours, and that was really it. This year, the really exciting thing we've started seeing is tea beers. We originally brought this in to sell as singles. Thank you very much to Corey Met at Two Guys, who was actually the guy who pointed out that I really needed to have this on the shelf because he was excited about it. We've started carrying more and more of these tea beers. So Annex has one called the King's English, which is a tea pale ale, and now we have the Situation Afternooner, which is a tea saison. We're starting to see more and more and more tea used as an ingredient in brewing, which I'm very excited about. It adds a really neat, delicate aroma, but more just mouthfeel, because when you make tea, you always get tannin from soaking the leaves. And if you've attended any of our wine tastings, one of the things that gives a wine grip and gives it body and gives it mouthfeel is tannin. When you can add that tannin to a beer, it really does change the perspective and change the experience. Where are Sabro hops from? Sabro, I believe, are one of the New Zealand versions. So in terms of hop varieties that are coming out, you have your classic European varieties. So these are your Spalt and your Pearl, and you have, of course, the old-fashioned British varieties like East Kent's Golding and Fuggles. Then you have the North American varieties, so those are your Cascades and your Centennials. And while the German hops and Czech hops tend to be very cheesy and fairly planty and fairly mineral, and the British hops tend to be very, very spicy and subdued, American hops are very, very straight up. They're kind of fresh grapefruit, they're fresh pine, lots of resin, they're very in your face. They tend to have a high degree of alpha acids. They tend to be very, very bitter if you make a beer with them. And then finally, you have the New Zealand hops, where you have all of the new experimental varieties. And there's a lot of experimentation going on in the US too. But in terms of developing new hop varieties and developing new hop clones and finding new ways to present hops in a beer, that tends to be a largely New Zealand innovation, or at least it has been until recently. And yeah, Craig, you hit it right off the hops with mangoes on this situation. Mangoes right off the hop immediately, and then just, the tea is right there, but the beer just, I don't know, this just smells incredibly, incredibly inviting. You just want to jump into this one. Oh, yeah. So they make this with the French Saison yeast. Now, there is a couple of different varieties of Saison yeast. You have the classic Belgian yeast, which comes from Brasserie Dupont, or Saison Dupont. And it's very, very distinctive. There's a particular kind of Pond's cold cream Vaseline unique characteristic to it that really not a lot of other yeasts really show off. If you taste DuPont in a beer, you can pick it out immediately. It's really distinctive. And it does create this really, really beautiful distinctive Saison character, but it's very difficult to brew with. DuPont yeast has a bad habit of getting stuck, in the sense that it will ferment the beer part way and then it'll just stop fermenting. There's plenty of sugar, there's plenty of available oxygen, everything's fine, and you have to just gently heat the beer up and then cool it back down. Gently heat it back up, cool it back down, and eventually you'll almost like bump start the fermentation back into actually happening. The other major Saison yeast comes from a brewery called Thirier, which unfortunately we don't get in Canada at the moment. That's the French Saison yeast, and that's what they've used here. I find it is more subtle than DuPont yeast, as well as being, ooh, there's a ton of mango to this. Do they brew this with mangoes? Oh yes, it's called Read the Recipe, idiot. Yes, they cold infuse it with oolong tea and mangoes. Yes, that would be why it tastes like mangoes. They put mangoes in it. Well done, me. But yeah, the Thirier yeast, it finishes drier, it finishes cleaner, it tends to be a little easier to brew with, and it's a little more subtle. I don't personally drink a ton of tea. My wife is the main tea person in the house. I couldn't tell you an oolong from an Earl Grey, to be perfectly honest with you, so I don't know whether this is a good interpretation of an oolong or a bad. I know about as much about tea as I do flowers. Ooh, Chad. Chad apparently made a beer with rooibos tea a few years ago. I'd love to hear more about that. I don't know. I'm really hoping that this is what we're going to see this summer, because there's always something that takes off every year that we just see, you know, a couple of good ones come out at the very start of the summer, and then by mid-July everyone's doing a version of it, and by August we're all completely sick of it and just want it to go away. I'd be kind of okay if the tea beers became that trend this summer, because I really enjoy them. Now, as I said, of the three breweries we got on the table here today, this is the oldest of them, in the sense that, you know, old is going back to 2016, so a whole 4 years. None of these breweries are even 5 years old yet. These guys are barely a year old. These guys are 2, and they're already just rolling with these incredible, incredible beers right out the gate, and I absolutely love that. Other beers from these guys that we've had in the store, we brought in their Page Turner IPA, which I thought was a really, really nice IPA. And I'm going to call the brewery and see what else they have. The issue with Situation for us is, you know, when we sell you something, we have a computer system, and when we sell it, it takes it out of inventory after I finish the sale. With Situation, all of the barcodes on the beers that we brought in from them have been the same, so I can't actually, you know, sell 2 of them at the same time. I'm going to call them and see if they have some beers that have different barcodes, because I would like to the Page Turner, I love this, and I'd like to have more of their beers in the shop. So that's something we'll be looking towards for next week and the week after. What are some other tea beers for this year? The only one that I've got on the shelf right now is the Annex Kings English, but it's what I'm hearing from people. When I was up in Calgary, I talked to David Establishment and Jesse at 88 and said, oh, what are you doing this week? And I said, oh, I'm doing the Situation Tea Saison. And they immediately said, oh, yeah, have you had the Annex Saison or the Annex Tea beer? Those are so good. And it's got all the brewmasters that I know and all the brewery people I know talking. So that's why I kind of think it might be a bit of a runaway, just in terms of it's got people that are good brewers excited and interested in it, so I think we might see more of it coming down the line. Now, the idea of putting tea in beer isn't that brand new. First time I saw a tea beer was probably 6-7 years ago, but I think it's the first time we've ever had one in the store. No, we had a white tea from McKellar. That was years and years ago, though. And it wasn't very good. So let's jump into the next one. So this is Sea Change. Now Sea Change, this is a brewery that I'd heard about, and I kept checking at Liquor Connection. They were not distributing through Connect yet, and I couldn't get their beer. And when I decided that, this was going to be a Edmonton tasting, I was like, well, I'll try and get Sea Change one more time. And the only one from them I could actually get was the Wolf. And I was like, oh, it's the New England Pale. Well, yes, obviously we have to have that. That's the right smell. Sea Change has been getting some really, really great love and great press lately. In terms of, when you're in the biz, you hear whispers all the time. I was hearing about 88 and Establishment from Cabin, and I heard about Cabin, largely from Nigel because he'd actually been there. Long before we ever actually got access to it. And the people that I knew in the industry and people that I trusted, they kept coming back and talking about Sea Change, and I had to try it, and I had to get up to Edmonton. It wasn't down here yet. So when you keep hearing things like that, it's really encouraging, and it makes you really want to get after it. And Sea Change is one that I've wanted for a while. So this is actually my first time trying a beer from this brewery, so I'm right there with you, this being a new experience for me. I don't think I've ever been to really many breweries that don't have a cool, laid-back vibe. I'm trying to think of a brewery that gave me like a bad experience that wasn't related to the food. Because again, I don't usually go to breweries that have bad beer. I don't know if I've ever been to a brewery. Oh, no, I have. I went to Twin Sails in Hood River, Oregon, and that was a bit of a beautiful brewery, beautiful restaurant looking right down on the river. We were just outside Portland. It was stunning, but very much get you in, get you out, get you in, get you out, get you poured, and get on to the next table. It was a bit of a different, rushed experience, so I didn't really like it. Oh no, that's no good. Chad's lost his recipe for his tea beer. That's terrible news. And yeah, Craig, I'm really excited for this. Like, this is, okay, if you've been with us for all 5 weeks, I bet we have done 6 New England Pales. Because last week we had the Blind Men. The week before that we had Ring Pop. Week before, and I guess you could, I'm not going to count Wave Pool in there. Week before we had Establishment, so we had Afternoon Delight and Skyrocket. And then before that we did Night Gallery and something else. Yeah, we've probably done at least a half dozen of New England Pales, and this is right up there with the others. Maybe not as cloudy hazy as some. I wonder if there's some more sediment in the bottom of the can here. No, for a hazy IPA, that is remarkably clear. It's got a little haze to it, but not much. And then, yes, it's got that low bitterness, lots of tropical fruit. You've got the nectarines, you've got the peaches, you've got the very, very gentle mandarin orange rather than hard grapefruit like a West Coast IPA. You've got that dusty dryness at the very back because the rather than coming off very sharp bitterness, the bitterness is actually coming off very drying, at least to me. Carbonation is really nice on this too. I'll be honest, I know that the cans are, I know why we went to cans, because cans are a lot cheaper for breweries, and I know for a fact that 88 doesn't even have a canning line. They're depending on a mobile canning truck for now, and I believe Establishment is as well. And there's no such thing as a mobile bottling line, so if you want a bottling line, you have to buy one for like $60,000, $80,000, which for, you know, a brewery can be more than the cost of the rest of their setup. So I've also found that, you know, cans get cold faster, they're larger. They're also completely immune to being light struck. And I don't know, I like the carbonation more out of cans. Call me crazy if you want, but I actually really like the carb on cans. Oh, Kevin. Yeah, why are they called New England Pale Ales? So we covered this a little bit when we were talking to Jesse at 88, and more so with Shane from Blind Man. The reason they're called New England Pale Ales is this style, this hazy pale ale with lots of tropical fruit and not a lot of bitterness. They were pioneered by a couple of breweries in the New England area. Actually, both are in Vermont. So one is Sean Hill at Hill Farmstead Brewing, and the other is Alchemist Brewing with their kind of the proto-New England IPA, which was called Heady Topper. Those were really the first beers that really pioneered this hazy, high aroma, low bitterness style, and everybody else has kind of copied from those two, especially Heady Topper. Sean Hill does a lot of really interesting work with Saison yeasts and wine barrels and all kinds of crazy infusions, and I don't think I've ever had one of his beers twice. Like, they're all different. And each batch is quite different from each other. In terms of like a commercially prepared New England pale that's been repeatable and the same style, kind of batch after batch after batch, it would have to be Alchemist Heady Topper, which ironically actually only came in a tall single can. It was the only way you could get it back then. And I don't know, I maybe like to think that with the rise of New England pales, maybe that's what popularized the rise of the tall can again, which I think is great. But yes, that's why they're called New England Pales, is they are clones of, to a certain extent, Hill Farmstead, but mostly Alchemist Heady Topper. Struggling after getting hooked on 88, everything feels light. I'm pretty shameless in my love for some breweries. 88, Establishment, and Cabin are the three that I work with on a week-to-week basis. I'm up there, if not every week, probably 3 weeks in 4 picking up beer. I have an amazing relationship with all three breweries. We are going to get Cabin on here one of these days, just as soon as they have 5 minutes and some beer to sell me. I did actually get some Cabin last weekend. They actually gave me the Nocturne, some more Rise and Shine just for the wheat tasting, and then they gave me their City of Dreams Vienna Lager and their Staycation Berliner Weiss. So we've got some really, really neat new Cabin stuff. Oh, hello, Hand. Let's get you some Wolf. There you are. But yeah, I mean, I'm having to reach out and find new breweries because there's only so many things I can get from those guys. And we've been huge fans of Blind Man basically since the start, and huge fans of Annex basically since the start. But every so often, you know, somebody will recommend something to Nigel like they did with SYC, or I'll have been hearing whispers with Sea Change, or a friend or a client like Corey Med, who's, I guess, both. You know, they'll recommend something, and you know, you keep finding stuff. Occasionally you get bad advice. There's a couple of things on the shelf that I got talked into that are coming to a clearance rack near you. But no, for the most part, I mean, all of this is so personal. You know, all these are people that I can pick up the phone and call. I did a Scotch tasting last Thursday, and one of the guys who happened to be at the Scotch tasting, this online Scotch tasting, was one of the brewmasters for Snake Lake. So we're going to do a Snake Lake event in mid-June. So it's all super local and super small, and everybody talks to each other. And you know, when I was at 88 picking up beer on Saturday, they'd just gotten a mix pack of all the new Cabin seasonals, and they were tasting for the first time and just hanging out and trying them. It was great. I also agree that cans lend themselves to better artwork because you get the entire, you know, full size of the can that you can do different things with rather than just a little piece of the label. I like this format. I know that there's people who really don't. We're starting to see less pushback from it, but for a while there, a good chunk of restaurants did not want to serve a beer in a can. It didn't matter if it was the greatest beer in the world. One of the one of the questions I got so much during the summer of Blind Men New England 3 or 4 summers ago now, when it was all anybody wanted, was I get at least a phone call a week from a restaurant. It's like, hey, can you get Blind Men New England? I'm like, yeah, I can get you like 12 cans. Well, I don't want cans. When are you getting bottles? Well, when they start putting it in bottles. Well, when are they going to put it in bottles? I don't know. I don't make this stuff. 3-4 years on, they still haven't put it in a bottle, and they don't plan to. But for a while there was a huge pushback against cans, and you wouldn't see them in restaurants. And I guess that was canned beer having a certain lowbrow image. I think that's well and truly dead now, thank goodness. But that was a real thing for a long time. And thank you, Chad. Like, I also really love Retro Spectrum. I'll be honest, of all the cabin core beers, the Sunshine Rain, the Super Saturation, and the Retro Spectrum, despite the fact the Retro Spectrum looks like the world's most awesome 1970s van, we don't sell that much of it compared to the other two. Like, I can sell almost a flat a day of Super Sat. I can sell the better part of a flat a day of Sunshine Rain. But sometimes the day will go by where we don't sell a 4-pack even of Retro Spectrum, and I feel very sad because it's subtle and it's spicy and it's pretty, and it's like, I love beers that are not afraid to get up in my face and just be mean to me and show me all the flavor in the world, but there's still a place for subtlety. I am still a massive fan of the part-time model from Establishment, and that's subtle as all get out, and so is the Retro Spectrum, and it makes me sad sometimes when beers like that maybe go a little under the radar. On the other hand, it's nice when they go under the radar because we're not sold out of them all the time like we are with Super Saturation. Bias Brewing in Kalispell. Oh, that's a fun story, Justin. Okay, so why don't we get, I had somebody in the other day, and they came in, and I don't think they've been in the store before, and he's like, oh, what do you have for IPAs? And I got in and I told him about Annex and Blind Man and SYC and Cabin and 88 and all the other ones. And he's like, oh, well, what do you have for like American IPAs? And it took me a second, and it was like, do I even still have an American IPA on this? Turns out I did. I had some Lagunitas, but if you'd been in here 6-8 years ago even, we had 8 beers by Lagunitas and 4 beers by Stone and 3 beers by Founders, and like the whole beer fridge was just American imports. There's a little bit of like local stuff because Blind Man was just getting going, and Wild Rose was still a thing, and we still kept Big Rock on the shelf for the most part, and there was a little bit of local stuff, but the vast majority of the cool stuff we got, I can remember like getting up early to get on the computer, so I was there for like the Deschutes Fresh Squeezed release when it came out. And now, like, the local scene is so crazy good that there's no market. And there was actually a company. Basically, what he did is he just sold Montana craft beers into Alberta, and for a while there, he was doing a ripping business. Like, he had Harvest Moon Brewing in Belt, and he would have had Tamarack Brewing out of Lakeside, and all these other really Big Sky. He was the very first person to bring Big Sky IPA to Alberta. And he did really ripping business for a couple of years. And then as the Alberta scene took off, there just wasn't the need anymore. Alberta beer just kind of took over and never really looked back because, we could get beer super fresh. All the latest seasonals were here. We weren't, waiting 2 months to get the new seasonals. And, you could pick up the phone and call the brewery and be like, hey, can I come up there on Saturday? Like, yeah, we do tours all day. It was kind of amazing how quickly the local brewer scene took off to the point where we actually don't have any real demand for like American IPAs anymore. And I can remember it was always sold. I like the Stone beers. It's just, I've brought them in a couple of times. Every now and then I'll bring in like just single tall cans of like Arrogant Bastard or Stone IPA. But honestly and truly, like, they're not the tall cans, which are the format everybody wants. They're usually the glass bottles still, which means they're more expensive to ship. And let me tell you, like, if I put a 6-pack of bottles on the shelf compared to a 4-pack of tall cans, it's still going to be there for a while. Even like the Deschutes, the Fresh Haze and Fresh Squeeze IPA in cans versus the Obsidian and Black Butte Dark Ales, even in the deadest, darkest part of winter when people should just be buying the heck out of those dark beers, we sell a flat of the cans for every 6-pack of bottles we sell, even though they're more summer beers. So no, Stone's just right now kind of the wrong style of beers at the wrong time. If we start seeing them 4-pack tall cans, if their prices come down, aka the exchange rate becomes less terrible, and we start getting a little fresher beer that's always, but by the time the new Stone seasonal comes out at Stone, and by the time we get it here, SYC could cycle through 3 new seasonals, and they've already come and gone. There just isn't the level of excitement and interaction and engagement, and it just takes longer. Everything's kind of moving through frozen molasses. What's my take on the Old Man River Brewing? I love those cats. They have been so nice to us right from the very get-go. They are finally in cans. They were in stubby bottles for a while, which did fine. We sell so much more now that they're in the 6-pack cans. Their lager, now, if you know me well, if you've been through 5 of these, you'll be surprised that I opened with their lager. But you know what? There's a time and a place for like a nice, simple, pale lager, and call me crazy if you want to, but I don't think anybody else does one as well as they do. The only one I think that even comes close is that Cabin Zen Garden Rice IPA. No, that Blue Bridge Lager is great, and in the same style as Retro Spectrum, that kind of understated, spicy, little bit old-fashioned kind of American-style pale ale, in the same style as like a Sierra Nevada Pale. Old Man River's Pale is great. They also have the Blonde Ale, which is, I don't like blonde ales. They're just not my palate at all. I'd rather have the lager or the pale, but they're both great. Their Bad Santa barley wine was great. The brown ale that was aged in the Black Velvet Rye barrels was great. The regular brown ale, I love on tap. I kind of struggle with on bottles. It's the same problem I have with the Medicine Hat, or not Medicine Hat, the Hell's Basement, Rise Against the Machine. It's one of my favorite beers on planet Earth on tap. In the can, it just misses something, and I feel the same way about the brown ale from Old Man River. If you have a chance to try it on tap, it's absolutely spot on. And yeah, I'm right there with you, Eric. The Old Man's tap room is really fun because it's small and it's interesting and it's cute, and all their tap handles look like fly rods. It's an interesting place. I like going to Old Man River. And you know what? Old Man Brewing, they treat everybody that they deal with, at least they've treated me and every client I've hooked them up with. There's people that I sometimes worry about, setting up with someone and saying, well, I wonder how it's going to go if I set them up for a draft line. Anytime somebody expresses any interest in Old Man River, it's like, yes, you should go talk to them. You should go deal with them because they're great. They'll take care of you in a way that I don't know if anybody else in the industry does. They're just, small town service is such a cliche because they're from a small town, and it makes it seem kind of elitist, but it's just, they have a level of customer service I really don't think anybody else is doing right now. And we deal with some absolutely amazing breweries, but Old Man River's just on their own tier. Okay, before we get on to the last beer, we are going to talk about next week's beer tasting, because we are changing it up a little bit. So we have done brewery profiles, we have done just kind of a random scattering of things, and that's so far really what we focused on. Well, for our next 2, we're going to focus on a theme in terms of style. I really love well-made wheat beers. Call me crazy if you want, but it's one of those things I really enjoy, especially as the weather turns warmer. And we're going to explore some really unique ones. We're going to do an 88, we're going to do a couple of cabins, and then I believe for the very first time we're actually going to do a beer, not just from outside Alberta, although that is a first I think, we're also going to do a beer from outside Canada. This was a point of contention between Devin and I, because I kind of wanted to keep it all Canadian, but I also wanted to say, okay, well, here's some really cool modern wheat beers that are all riffing off a theme, but we should reference something really, really traditional. And I thought about doing the Far, but the Far only comes in tiny cans. And I wanted everything to be, all the same size, so they fit in the pack really well, which, as you can see, that didn't really work. This is a 500 ml, and these are all, 473s, so they're not quite the same size can. Regardless, we've got the super traditional, really old school Polliner Hefeweizen, which is exactly what you'd expect. Right down the middle, it's got the banana, the clove, it's cloudy as all get out. It's going to be really, really cool. With the hologram wheat, which is a very American-style wheat beer, fresh citrus, dry hopped, very pretty. And whenever I'm talking to people about 88, it's always, well, we talk about the Night Gallery, we talk about Ring Pop, we talk about Tiffany, we talk about Duotang, we talk about Wave Pool. And the hologram just sits there, just kind of, the Ralph Wiggum in the Clash is hoping someone's going to notice, and it's amazing, and no one ever talks about it. So we're going to taste it, damn it. From Cabin, we've got wheat two ways. We're going to do the Rise and Shine Hefeweizen. To me, this is kind of their, again, one of my favorite seasonals. I loved it last year. I love it again this year. It reminds me of Dole Whip. It's just straight up fresh pineapple and refreshment. It's just right in your face with all this fresh pineapple. And then it's just, it's so incredibly tart and refreshing. And it's got this milky sort of body feel that almost feels milkshakey. It's really, really interesting. And then finally, we have the Nocturne, which is a Dunkelweizen. Because, we usually think about wheat beer as being a very pale beer. You can do it as a dark. And they've done a really, really good job with that. So that's next week. Week after will be, by popular request, sours. Let's talk about wine on Friday. Wine is going to be a lot of fun. Looking at the names, I know quite a few of you have actually already signed up for the wine tasting. Good for you. Smart choice, because as much fun as it was having one wine last week, where we had the winemaker with us, live from Argentina, we are getting Mauro Villarejo from Trapezio to come on and talk us through two of his Malbecs and his Cabernet Sauvignon. And then, because we always do four when we can afford it, we're doing the Duragudi as well. But yeah, we've actually got an Argentine winemaker joining us live from Argentina. And you can ask him questions and hang out. And, he's going to be sitting in Mendoza, half a world away, talking about wine with us and drinking wine with us. And it's going to be the most amazing thing. I'm super excited for this. I have no idea how I'm going to top this, ever. But yeah, this is this week's wine tasting. Next week is Portugal. We have been ignoring the spirit side a little bit as well. We will be introducing not a live series, but something kind of interesting called Cantankerous Bastard Mixology next week. So that's coming up as well. I won't say too much, but we've got that as well. Let's move on to the last one. Just going to run through the comments here real fast. Oh wow, we've had so many comments that I've missed. Yeah, the Trapezios actually get really good scores in chat. Midnight, depends on the demands. I haven't had a lot of call for them yet, but we'll see how it goes. Tell you more about the potions. Well, we wanted to do something with spirits, and there is going to be a bit of Scotch tasting happening. I talked about it with one of our best partners in business is Lee Hansen, who's a whiskey importer, which if you've ever been to one of our whiskey tastings, Lee was probably there. He and I talked about a way where with enough gloves and masks and sanitizer, I think we can probably just make it work filling small bottles of Scotch to take home. So that will be happening. But before that, before we had the idea of maybe finding a way to get whiskey safely into people's hands at home, we said, well, it's coming into summer, and what if we just taught people to mix some offbeat drinks? I mean, everybody knows how to make a Cosmo, and everybody knows how, their own particular way to make a martini, but what if we, taught people how to make pisco sours or Negronis, or Mike and I could argue about how to make an old-fashioned, because there's about 10,000 different ways to make an old-fashioned. So we're going to do that. First one, I think we're shooting it on Friday night before the wine tasting, and it should launch sometime next week. So we'll see how it goes. If it gets a good response, we'll keep doing it. If not, well, we did one. We'll see. How do we send it to BC? Legally, I just straight out can't. Shipping anything alcoholic across provincial borders is the fastest way I can think of to lose your liquor license. So unfortunately in this one, We might just have to lose you. I'm sorry. That you don't play those sorts of silly games with the AGLC and stay in business. That's just not one you play around with. Or die from French 75s. There was a particular party where I bartended where some people who remain nameless, Ariel, almost died of French 75 intake. Let's move on to our last New England Pale before I get myself in trouble. So this is the Fjord New England Pale. And if you're around for the 88, this isn't that far away in concept from the Ring Pop. I think they're very different beers in the mouth, but they're very similar in style. Both are a heavily dry hopped New England style IPA. Both are fermented with that fast fermenting Norwegian farmhouse yeast, the Kveik. Pardon me. Excuse me there. Now, we get these really pretty tropical fruit notes from a New England Pale. We get even more tropical fruit notes coming off the Kveik yeast. We just get the best of both worlds here, and I really, really like this. Now, I love doing things like the Fjord. The reason I wanted to do the Fjord is we've been bringing in the SYC for, I don't know, a month, maybe 5 weeks now. And the Pineapple FOMO, it sells out within like minutes of us putting it on a shelf. The Salud sells really well. The Nuage sells quite well. The First Timer IPA and the Curiosity Kill the Cat do great. Fjord, despite being, I think, their highest rated beer out there, tends to sell the slowest. And I was curious why. So when we were picking SYCs, I had a few options, but the first one I actually wanted to do was the Fjord because I wanted to taste it and say, oh, am I missing something? Is this bad? And no, I don't know why this isn't selling. This is great. Very different beer from the Wolf. I think I probably should have done this one first. I think the Wolf is maybe a little more expressive, and I think that might just be by brewing style. I think here they're trying to emphasize some of the more soft fruit notes. Here you're getting a little more direct, like tropical fruit and citrus bite. This tends to be a little more soft, delicate kiwis and things. Hello, Han. But as I take some time with this, I'm starting to get lemon drops, starting to get mangoes. The yeast note's really prominent. I found the yeast was here in the Salud. I actually want to jump back to that just to see what the yeast note is similar between the two. But I really do pick up the yeast more on this than I think any of the other beers I have, which is interesting because Saison yeast is designed to be showy, and this is, in theory, a much lighter beer. It shouldn't have, or it should show the yeast more clearly than a big hoppy New England Pale. I'm surprised how yeasty this is. If anyone has any recommendations for sours for 2 weeks from now, I'd love to hear them. There's only one beer that we are guaranteed to be doing, which Aaron, I think, could probably pass me a can. It is the, he just took off his headphones so fast. It is the 8-Wired Cucumber Hippie, which was a beer that I liked so much. We may have had one before the tasting. This was a beer that I got to try for the very first time last week. We brought it in. I'd actually brought it in just because it sounded cool as heck, just having a cucumber beer, and I liked 8-Wired. But somebody bought one. I think it might have been Mike bought one and opened it for everybody to share. And I took literally one sip and said, "We're doing sours. I have to taste people on this because it's just so good." I love sours. It's not something I take home very often. I would take this home any day of the week. This is just absolutely fun on a bun. And if you told me that my favorite sour was going to be cucumber, I'd have called you a liar. But this is super fun, and this is the inspiration for our sour beer tasting in 2 weeks. So that's coming up, but I have that picked. I haven't got a single other beer picked thus far for the beer tasting. And the last question I would love to actually ask is, would anybody be pro, con, for, against us repeating beers? Like if a whole bunch of people really wanted to see Jamrock in the lineup with sours, well, we already did Jamrock with the Establishment Week. Would anybody be militantly against that, or is everybody totally fine with that? Do let me know, because those are the sorts of questions that, we all sit around and, scratch our heads and wonder about, but we never really think to, ask you and say, hey, would you be okay with this? You're really the only people we need to ask. So, yeah. Can we do a Medicine Hat or Lethbridge beer night? Maybe a Highway 3 night. We are waiting on Lethbridge beer night. We've been sticking with the tall can concept. Right now, I mean, God only knows what's happening with Cooley right now. I know that theoretically is just started with canning. I haven't seen any of their cans yet. And I have had conversations with Daryl at Spectrum already, who's already doing tall cans. As soon as he has enough inventory to give me some beer to do one of these, Daryl will be doing one of these with us, absolutely. In terms of Medicine Hat, yeah, I would love to do Medicine Hat. Again, most of the stuff coming out of there is just in the standard cans, but we're starting to see more tall cans, like the Medicine Hat Brewco Pineapple Sour and the new Pink Boots beer. So we're starting to see more stuff in the tall cans for Medicine Hat. I think there is absolutely room for a Medicine Hat profile tasting. But, you know, I'm a Hurricanes fan. Screw Medicine Hat. So, no. We could do something like that, though. And apparently we are super on board with repeats. I love it. Then yes, in that case, yeah, I will look into this at doing maybe a little more. If I need to repeat something, we'll repeat it. Because I know there are some people who've done all 5 with this, but I can't imagine it's most. Maybe it is. I don't know. But I don't think it's most. All right, so that I think is going to wrap up the formal portion of the tasting. I'll stick around for questions and comments, and I'm going to go back and forth through a couple of these just to see how they compare to each other out of order. But yeah, let me know if you've got anything. Is Stronghold canning? I keep hearing different things about that. We're actually going to be sending a truck out that way. To find out, because I actually have to pick up beer at Old Man River because we're effectively out of Old Man River. So we need to drop off some empty kegs at Stronghold anyway. So we're going to stick our nose in and just see what's going on there. If there are Stronghold cans, we'll be picking those up sooner rather than later because A, they're wonderful people, and B, their beers, A, it was started out quite good, and it's gotten a lot better since they first opened. I really like their new stuff. Nicely done, Craig. And I love this comment crowd. It's like, yeah, apparently they're doing too. You know things I don't, and I absolutely love that. So yes, we will be out at Stronghold on Friday returning some kegs. I'll shoot Elaine an email tomorrow and see what I can get. Might even have Stronghold on the shelves for the weekend. Who knows? Anyone want to pick an order for these? I know mine, but I'd love to hear other people's orders first. Oh man, everybody not only knows that they are canning, they know which beers they're canning. You guys are the best. So yes, cream ale and IPA. I will get on that. I'm gonna give that my beer of the night. 2, 3, 4, but it's a tight run thing, and that's kind of interesting because SYC was the brewery I was the most excited to pour, and they ended up towards the back for me. This sea change was a shocker. I'm gonna finish this can, I think. 3-1-4-2. Okay, Craig's the opposite of me. And you're welcome, Ariel. We'll see you out next week for. You also like the sea change? Yeah, I think the sea change is pretty strong. I should put these back in the order we actually tasted them. So I'm 3-2-1-4, I guess, in the order we tasted them. A lot of love for number 1, the Salute. Yeah, I did really like this. It's such a tough lineup. I mean, it's like trying to rank the 88 beers or trying to rank the establishment. Where do you really go wrong? Although I will say, Aaron, have we done a bad beer so far through 5 weeks? I don't think we've had anything I've disliked.
No.
Yeah.
Good. Beautiful stuff.
So now I've talked about what we've got coming up. I talked about doing wheat and I talked about doing sour, and we will have Snake Lake and Cabin sometime in the next few weeks. Other than doing a Highway 3 or a Medicine Hat focus, what else would you folks like to see? What else would you like us to focus on as a topic? Because we are very responsive. With the wine tasting, we put it out there and said, what do you want to see? And you said Canada, Argentina, and Portugal. And last week you did Canada, this week we're doing Argentina, and next week we're doing Portugal. So, you know, I can be brought around to listen to reasons. So if you have specific requests, you've got a very good chance we'll do them. Ooh. Going back to the Slood's interesting. I didn't expect that to come off so sweet after the IPAs, but I guess it's not that bitter a beer, so it's going to come off quite sweet. Probably too late in the season, porters and stouts. It's not. You know, spoiler warning. I know when we do the Snake Lake one, we're going to be doing the Commodore Stout. I don't mind a big dark stout in summer. I think it might be wrong as a total topic for a tasting, but I do, when somebody makes a really great dark beer, I'm going to work it in wherever we can, because I don't want to completely ignore all dark beers just because it's summer. It's like completely pretending, you know, red wine doesn't exist for 4 months, which at home I do, but, you know, at work I probably shouldn't. Ooh, yeah. Cider could be fun. Actually, cider could be really fun. Malt forward beers would be great. I agree, Eric, actually. I think malt forward could be a lot of fun. I'm trying to think what we could do for that, but it'd be its own week. We could do, ooh. Yeah, we could do something like the Blind Man Stock Ale and like an Old Speckled Hen. If Daryl has got his cans out, he makes a great ripping good bitter. Yeah, I think you might be onto something there, Eric. I think that'd be fun. Stop in different places. Pilsners, Ingle Pales, that could be fun. Yeah. I could be on for like, let's do a Belgian Pale versus an American Pale versus a British Pale versus like a local Pale. I could be very on board with that. How do our neighbors stack up with Alberta breweries from Canmore and Fernie and that? Well, Fernie's not in Alberta, is it? No, I think that Fernie Brew Co. makes some of the best, like, everyday six-pack beers going. I really, really like What the Huck, bizarrely enough. Like, when you think about beer and me, you wouldn't think I'd be a big What the Huck fan. I actually really quite like it. Yeah. Tony says do a tasting on his sun deck. All right. I mean, we could do a tasting on location. Just out there in our sunglasses, hanging out in a lawn chair. I'm sure you'd have a delightful time shooting that with lighting and everything, Aaron. Yeah. Let's make Aaron's life difficult. I'm actually very in favor of that. Ooh, bitters, ESBs. Ooh, I absolutely adore English bitters. It's a weakness. If I go into a new brew pub or a new brewery or a new bar and I've never been there before and they have a bitter, unless they have something that's like ludicrously famous in barrel age or ludicrously famous in hoppy or sour, the very first thing I'm ordering is the bitter, because bitters are so incredibly difficult to make well. They have to be steely hops, but also a little bit aromatic. They have to have like the world's hardest water. They have to have this bright, brilliant, like fresh, clean graininess without being too sweet, because you still want a bitter to be dry. I took a stab at brewing a good bitter 6 times when I was still home brewing, and I never came up with anything vaguely good. Bitter's just one of those perfect styles that when you get a really great one that doesn't taste like hot boiled asparagus and Brussels sprouts, is so perfect. I would love to do an English style bitters one. Finding 4 good bitters that come in tall cans and have some local connection would be really, really good. That'd be tricky to do, but we could do that, absolutely. Don't know how many people would buy it, but I'd love to do it. All right, well, I think that comes up on being an hour, folks. Thank you for all the ideas. And yes, more people jumping on the bitters train. I also, hey, I'm very much in favor of this idea. So yeah, I will see some of you folks in 2 nights for Argentine wine tasting with Maro Viejo. And I will see the rest of you in a week for wheat ales. We are working on a guest speaker for that. I'm not sure exactly who we're going to get yet, but we will see what we can find. I have a somewhat unusual idea, but I think it could be a very, very good one. In the meantime, I'm Big Kyle with Andrew Hilton Wine and Spirits. Thank you all so much for tuning in. It's been an absolute delight hanging out and drinking beer with you once again, and we'll see you next week for wheat ales. Thank you very much, and goodbye.